In the tranquility of the night, some stories quietly come to life. Welcome to Hauntings and Horrors. Now, I will take you through a chilling tales. So by this point, everybody is no doubt well aware of the Area 51 memes and all the hubbub surrounding them. Apparently, over 1 million people are said to storm the perimeter on September 20th of this year. And let's be honest for a second. I doubt that it'll happen. And even if it did, you're gonna by some ridiculous miracle. They managed to overwhelm the most powerful military on Earth and infiltrate a top-secret base. I don't think they would be exactly thrilled with the results. I'll just come right out and say, I guess Area 51 is a red herring. It's a distraction, and it's pretty much always has been. Nothing out there but sand and reclusive sinuses so crusty as lake. At this point, think about it. If Area 51 is one of the most top-secret and covert black sites in the world, then why does everybody know about it? How secret can a secret be if everybody knows the secret? For God's sake. Even Obama acknowledged its existence a while back, and that's the whole point of it, and they want you distracted, so you don't look for the others. But why take my word for it? Who am I anyways? Just some club on the internet that decided to cash in on a trend for some clout and perhaps a bit of that sweet collar right. Well, yes, but actually no. That may be who I am now. But I was once a person of particular interest to the United States government. Most people knew me as Mr. Blue, not my real name. But it is easier to pronounce, and I used to be a pilot, and I did that for many years, and I loved every second of it. I'll tell you, there's nothing quite like soaring through the skies and breaking the sound barrier for the first time. You might crap your pants a little bit, but it's all just part of the experience really now. Unfortunately, the type of work I did was above top secret and, for all of our safeties, I could not go into any further detail on what I actually did or who I worked for. One day I was out on a classified reconnaissance mission in a certain area where I should not have been. I'll apologize here for the vague details on certain things and what you've got. Understand, the things I'm about to tell you are beyond top secret. They would kill me 10 times over for uttering the word Daventa. So here's to hoping that nothing happens. Anyway, he said the mission was going as planned, when suddenly my instruments started going berserk on my pressure inside of the cabin just plummeted, and the speed and fuel consumption gauges looked like they were playing ping pong with each other. Everything began to rattle like crazy, and my alarms interrupted into a symphony of irritation. The next thing I know, I see this. Bright lights past me at an ungodly speed. The shock wave that it produced was so violent that it shredded the whole of my craft. In a split second, I went casually flying along to suddenly regaining consciousness as I plummeted headfirst towards the ground at terminal velocity. I managed to pull my shoe before I splattered. But, as I touched down, I almost wished that I hadn't there. I was met by an awaiting entourage of at least a dozen men in winter camo suit and masks, and they all pointed their weapons at me and screamed in a language which I recognized. His English. I tried my best to calm them down. Him appear on threatening it. But that didn't stop them from wrenching me into a pair of handcuffs and haul me into one of their APCs. And they began to drive away, and the real severity of the situation hit me. I was not going to be saved. The people that I worked for it never said it, but it was always well known that if you were ever captured, and you were pretty much on your own with that in mind. I had no real incentive to keep my mouth shut once they started interrogating me. It might seem cowardly here. But I was not about to be brutally tortured for a former ally, which would have never come to bail me out. Yeah. The government says that they don't torture people. But trust me, when they really want to know something, that there's no tactic too extreme, and they really wanted to know something. And so I told them about who I'd worked for while my mission was where I grew up, all that jazz. It was all fabricated, but they took the bait regardless. Thanks to their severe distrust of the Russians at the time. They were actually pretty cool after that. They wouldn't let me leave the custody about 700. That was better than being data. Or at least it was at first. and they transported me away from my initial interrogation place into a secure facility somewhere nearby. I was blindfolded the whole time, but from the rumblings of multiple vehicles, sounds of doors sliding open multiple times, and the distinct feeling of my stomach dropping, I could tell that's it. They had taken me somewhere deep underground. Soon after that, I stepped off the elevator, and they removed my blindfold. Their leader was a guy with a stern face, a thick gray beard and eyes that looked edged from concrete. He wore a black suit with some symbol upon his heart pocket that I didn't recognize. He stepped in front of everyone. Howard stretched his arms while staring me in the eye. "Welcome to your new home." An ever so slight grin slowly rounded his face. As he said it, I glanced down the dismal gray hallways, which seemed to stretch out further than I could see in multiple directions. And they led me down the hall on the right, past dozens of light corridors and rows, before ushering me into a cell. My hand comes to remove soon after, and the door slid shut behind me. The same man that had welcomed me into the facility then approached the window and pushed the intercom button. "Oh, we appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Blue. I don't believe there is any reason why our time spent together has to be unfriendly here. I apologize for all, Benison, but you must realize that this is a necessary precaution that we must take. I hope you understand." I took a moment, and then I nodded back. "I didn't. Wonderful. We will have dinner sent to you soon. If you require anything before that, please notify one of our guards outside of your quarters." And with that, he and his little entourage turned and strode down the hallway. That was my very first night in the facility that I eventually came to know as Fast or F-Easy. I don't think it's the official name, but I heard several personnel on the base refer to it by that acronym over the years. I still don't know what exactly it stands for in forbidden, enclosed, a ziggurat, a forsaken evil zoo, forest ejaculation ZO, a fabulous self-sabbies. The best that I could really come up with was a fortified experimental zone. It makes the most sense to all things considered. At first it actually wasn't too bad, and the staff was nice, and when they cooked a great food, and there was plenty to see around the base. Although every once in a while I would hear the screams just barely echoing through the vents. And then she feed me probably one more times after that, and were especially interested in the craft which I was piloting there. The craft in question was one of our own top secret technologies, but unfortunately it had been blown to smithereens by him, whatever that light was, so I couldn't tell them what about. It took years of incarceration there, but eventually the staff came to trust me almost as much as they did their own comrades. We would laugh and joke with one another, and soon enough we became, though it's some might even consider to be friends. I became especially close with one of the scientists there named Noah. Noah was a smart guy, and comical too, and he explained quite a lot of things to me. He and I would spend hours talking on countless occasions. He was my only real glimpse into what was happening in the outside world. He would bring him books and movies for us to enjoy together, and he kept me updated on everything, and over the next 30 years we developed a close friendship. That I will always treasure. I must have displayed some kind of intellectual potential, because they eventually started asking for my inputs on various curiosities stationed throughout the base. They only did it because I had sworn them complete loyalty and would never be allowed to leave the base anyways. But for me, it was just nice to feel included. The base itself was absolutely colossal. They always blindfolded me during transport to any location, but one time I caught a glimpse of the buttons on the elevator. There had to have been at least 50 of them on the panel. I remember the first time they showed me one of the lockdown locks. There were guards posted at every cell, and I heard some very strange noises and many knew Rami as we traversed the halls. I thought for sure they were about to show me some horrendous beast from the depths of hell, and I prepared myself accordingly. As the house of unseen things echoed throughout the halls, the lead scientist and dry Vincent Price rolled back to a mirror curtain, and my heart froze from anticipation. In the cell before has said there is nothing more than a human girl in a great jumpsuit. She was young and maybe 5 years older, but there seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary about her. I looked to driver see Val, and he flexes his cranial muscles before pressing a button. I heard the son of gas seep into the room. A few 10 seconds passed, when the girl suddenly shrieked like a banshee. Her head tilted back and I saw jagged and needle-like teeth emerge from her mouth. Her jet black eyes that lurched towards us. And she lunged at the window. She struck it hardened. It fell back to the ground, snarling and hissing like some ravenous jackal. Drive Raza. With him. Press the button again. Cutting the gas and posing a question. Have you ever seen anything like it? And, Mr. Blue, all I could do was shake my head slowly as I watched the young demon shout stalk about on the other side of a glass. And they found her in the woods outside of Whitehorse with a freshly disemboweled man. She was eating hema and appeared unaffected by the sub-zero temperatures. I suddenly felt like vomiting men, but I said nothing. I only stared back at the unusually gruesome girl. What the hell was she? Unfortunately, huh? I was never told anything else about her, and I doubt the personnel knew much more. Anyways, they came to show me a lot of very strange things over the years. The giant brownish, orange-haired primate that wanted to operate and seemed to respond to facial movements. The humanoid-shaped being that was only detectable via infrared equipment. A golden chest that would instantly kill anybody they touched it. A 10-foot-tall creature wrapped in vines and that emitted bouts of radiation and blended into environments with perfect camouflage. A monstrous fish, at least 80 feet in length, frozen on nitrogen, and various abhorrent creatures that I'm guessing were the results of relentless genetic tampering. I had never seen anything like it. All of the monstrosities housed here and the secrets buried in the possession. They also asked for my advice on a certain paradoxical phenomenon that had plagued them as well. And they told me that for decades there had been hundreds of unsolved cases of human disappearances that seemed to defy all explanation. Young children had been found on cliff edges that could not possibly be reached, while old and frail people would be discovered a dozen of miles away from where they had last been seen. Only a few hours later, most of them would never be found at all, though I could almost see the fear dripping from their eyes as they relayed case after case of the recorded incidents. And it was clear, although not sad, that they had no idea what the cause was, and unfortunately neither did I, as it was the first I'd ever hear of the bizarre phenomena. I told them honestly that I didn't believe my former allies were responsible, but I don't know if that made them feel better or worse. Throughout all my years there, I had always found one thing peculiar after all the weird and terrifying things that they showed me, and there is never any mention of extraterrestrials. And that's what everybody thinks that these black site facilities house after all. But nevertheless, and they made no mansion. That made me smile a bit when I thought about it too, because they had no idea how close they were. And the closest thing they had was this weird tentacle creature with a ring set of teeth in its mouth. It almost looked like an eel, but it possessed for iridescent green eyes and a ring around its head. It didn't live in the water either, but instead it slithered around the ground in a very swift, invariant settling motion. They said that its DNA resembled nothing like anything they had ever found on Earth before. Hence the reason they believed, but were not certain of its otherworldly origins. Noah and I got to talking back in his quarters one night as the rest of the crew retired for the evening. He shared with me a bit of his brandy, and we were content to just chat as friends late into the night. He told me a lot about himself that you never mentioned before. He showed me pictures of his wife and his son that had been taken from Emma. Noah admitted that he had died in a car crash a couple years back, while his wife passed 2 years later of cancer. It broke my heart to hear that, and I felt sorrow for my dear friend of some 30 years, and Noah was in his early 50s. But you would never know it. With the enthusiasm in his voice, it was during that conversation Noah ended up mentioning something I found very interesting. He told me that he believed that if an alien species exists at it and they were advanced enough to traverse the galactic canopy and reach Earth, but then they would obviously be quite intelligent. He said that he didn't believe in any of the Hollywood depictions of doomsday aliens, hell-bent on destroying humanity. He thought that they would be a lot more subtle than that. Think about it. You find something intelligent which represents almost no threat to Europe, and the first thing you do is try to kill it. Noah asked skeptically, as I considered his words for myself. And that would just be a waste. And no species that fancies themselves as advanced beings would do something so brash. At least I hope they would end. He chuckled slightly and shot me a knowing look, mixed with a unique intrigue that almost glistened in his gray eyes. Even if they thought that we were destroying our own planet or some planet, why would they care? There are trillions of other planets in the Milky Way alone, and they could pick any of them if they wanted natural resources. And I chuckled to myself, almost sensing where this conversation was headed. It's not the planets they're after, I replied. Noah snapped and pointed his finger at me as his face lit up. Exactly. And they would want to study us, learn how we operate, how we organize, and how we live. Noah's hand motions turned eccentric, and I saw his axis badge jostle around his neck. He took another sip of his brandy and continued, they would probably learn more about us than we even know about ourselves. I mean, granted, and they have to be more intelligent, and they could learn up close, understand how humans work. They would have no need for blood shadow when they could simply inconspicuously integrate into human culture. And they have no doubt mastered the art of altering the biology to disguise themselves as humans. I mean, that would be nothing when compared with the tech they would use to get here. Yo. He paused from his enthused monologue and wiped the steam off his glasses. I just said back at content a lot of continuum, as I found it fascinating that he could know so much. Aliens. They're not warlords, and they're poets, architects, authors, musicians. Begins that wish to create. It is the ultimate calling for an entity so powerful. Noah took a breath and reveled in his own explanation. His speech had turned a bit slurred, and I could see his eyes floating lazily in their sockets. He bent at my eyes in a look that he had never given to me before. It was a light that seemed to had all sense of formality and pose a question which he had long since suspected. The answer to, "You're not really from Russia, are you?" The sudden accusation caught me off guard, and that felt my stomach dropped like a lead weight. I didn't say anything, and Noah just scoffed. "You had everybody fooled. And I mean, I was for the longest time. You had a suitable backstory, an authentic and in accent. All the alibis you gave us checked out." He paused and he clasped his hands in front of me. He looked so authentic too. But there was one thing that you masked. One thing that you just can't fake. He looked me deep in the eyes and he fell silent. He didn't have to say it firm. I already knew what he meant. The hour impossible to truly fake that night that your craft was shot down. What were you doing here? Noah and I maintained a prolonged eye contact before I finally responded. Reconnaissance. For the first time in decades. I dropped the Russian accent, as it was clear there was no longer any reason to lie to my dear friend. "And what did you see?" Noah stared into the very depths of my soul as he asked. And I spoke the truth. Beauty and poetry creators, much like us. Noah just stared at me for the longest time, as if he were weighing my soul in his mind. I wondered what he had planned to do since he had found out. But I didn't ask. Noah eventually smiled and rose to make his way to the cell door. He reached into his coat pockets and went through a black steel pistol with a long snout. I slowly met his gaze at me. Shut. Old Mr. Blue. Do you wish to go home? I nodded. After pausing to think for a moment, Noah looked over his weapon, then primed it for use. I hope your allies can't forgive us without another word. He flashed his security badge in the locks and the door gave way. He motioned for me to rise and follow him. So I did. Noah glanced back and forth down the hallway, but due to the late hour and there was no one around, he and I sprinted down the corridor and onwards to one of the security booths. He flashed his badge as I hid just out of sight. He entered the room and I heard the noise of a brief scuffle beforehand, to bright flashes under debts. Noah re-emerged with wild eyes and beckoned me to follow. He and I dashed on the hallway and reached the massive main shaft elevators. Soon after, for the first time, I entered without a blindfold and Noah punched the button to the top floor and the security called required to power at 2. The security system will be down for a good half hour, but automated distress beacons have already been activated. That gives us about 8 minutes. Noah dropped the clip from his pistol and popped into fresh water. I saw speckles of blood on his glasses and cheek and a frenzied look in his eye. "Yeah, it's not. Take this." He reached out his hand and held something which I had not seen in decades, the old radio from my craft. I took it and he and I met eyes as the elevator door opened. It was back to running after that, but a few minutes of it. We had reached an underground parking facility. Noah quickly unlocked a nearby vehicle and the two of us hopped in as he fired it up. The engine roared to life and Noah accelerated through the lot a moment later, and we accidentally underground facility, and I saw my first vision of the night sky, and over for decades there were men stationed at the perimeter gates that attempted to stop us. But Noah didn't flinch. He crashed right through the wire fence of the perimeter, causing multiple lights to activate in our wake. I heard his siren blaring behind us. Then the silhouettes of people dashing throughout the snow. There's a suit in the back. Put it on. I did as he requested, without question, and I put the snug polyester garment over my body. It had covered every square inch from my foot to the nape of my neck and felt incredibly comfortable. There's a dial on your right side. You can use it to mask your body. Heat it and they're gonna be after you. He tossed the map into my lap and continued barking instructions. You can contact your friends with our radio. All right. His eyes flashed to me as he slid onto the main road and away from the compound. Yes, Noah. Not to make your way north. And they won't be expecting that. There's a river up there, about 30 miles away from the forest. Once you find it, at least until one, you find a small town. Ask the guy at the post office for Mr. White. He's a friend of mine who's agreed to help you. He'll take it from here. I try to digest the flow of information as best as I could and remain confident in it. All just happened so suddenly. Now I stashed you some rays in the bag. It should last you a good couple weeks. Noah then swerved around a corner and reoriented us onto a new dark road. In the sudden influx of adrenaline, a sudden thought occurred to me. What happens to you? Noah didn't seem to want to acknowledge the question. Oh, forget about that and just get back to your people. And behind us, a flurry of light suddenly ascended into the night sky. The whirring sound of rotary blades then pierced the tranquil canopy of the blustery night that I had hoped that I could have gotten you a bit farther than us. He suddenly slammed on the brakes and my header EGD forward, and the car spun back and forth along the icy road. Take this. He handed his long-barreled pistol over, and I hesitated. Lee took it. He and I then met eyes for one final time. This is where we say goodbye. Mr. Bowen. Why are you doing this for me? Noah sighed. I saw a certain sorrow swirl and his ironclad pupil said. He stayed silent for a moment, and only when the sounds of approaching engines grew louder was he spurred to reply. You don't belong here. You don't belong in a cage. I don't know where you come from. Plus, I want you to see the ones that you'd love again. His eyes began to water and he jealous of his neck before looking me in the eye one final time. I hope that she didn't think of us as captors or kidnappers. I hope you see us as you see yourself. I hope and I just hope that you can understand a single tear that rolled down his cheek. I put my hand on his shoulder. Here I always have and I always will. Thank you. Noah. I then held out my hand and he grabbed it tight as we shared one final moment, and before I ventured into blizzard. The journey from then on was long and arduous, with me spending weeks trudging through snow and frozen forests. Hounds, men, and machines pursued me for days. But I was able to elude. The rapper hates it. The terrain was brutal, unrelenting, but eventually I managed to find the river which Cabinet mentioned. By that moment, all my pursuers had long since gone silent. I followed the river and I found the town, and soon after the man known as Mr. White. He was a kind man and he gladly invited me into his house to avoid the agents. It is there that I have been ever since, awaiting my allies' arrival. They were stunned to hear from me again, but not as stunned as I was to find out. The radio was so functional, and they weren't entirely sure whether they could even trust me anymore. But I didn't leave them much of a choice. When I threatened to go public and expose them to the world, they finally agreed but admitted it would be months before they could reach me. I expected as much, and thankfully Mr. White allowed me to stay with him in a way of their eventual arrival. I found out soon after that my dear friend Noah, to whom I owe my freedom of life, had been found deceased. The authorities ruled it as a suicide. A gunshot wound to the back of the head. But obviously I had my doubts about it, and truly broke me to learn of one of my true friends' demise. But I knew it was what I had expected him. I like to think that is why he chose to do it. And furthermore, it is the reason that I am here, posting this now. Noah's legacy deserves to live on, and this is the only way that I know how to do it. And with that, we have come full circle to this message you are reading right now. And to address the original topic, Area 51 is indeed a reuse. Noah held a lot of power in his previous role. I mean, he told me all about the operation. The real prize is the pheasant mine former Posada, somewhere in eastern Alaska, buried beneath the snow, with all sorts of abhorrent things in its clutches. If you're going to store him anywhere, and that should be the place, just remember to pack a coat. Noah was a smart man and brilliant, even if you've managed to make it this far. But I'd like to think you were someone like Hammer, brave, curious, and with an almost innate sense of wonder that cannot be satisfied. It is my hope that Noah's ideas will live on through you. My allies would never approve of this message, but I now know that to bear on truth is something that all sentient beings should be allowed to proceed. Despite how unpleasant it may be to hear rant on, it was Noah's belief that the beings he knows is aliens that are already here, that, instead of murdering humans, as often portrayed in stories, and they would blend. Dania, take keen interest in human culture, a society, write books, poetry, and music, in hopes of connecting to something truly extraordinary, something that reminds them of themselves. If Noah is right, then maybe one day you'll even stumble upon such a story for yourself, and maybe you'll think it nothing more than a work of fiction to entertain you for a while. Maybe the author of said theoretical story would seem like nothing more than your run-of-the-mill internet user. He probably just wouldn't come right out and say hi, because that would be entirely too corny. He would probably just leave you the pieces and hope that you could understand the truth for yourself. Maybe you truly are, like Noah, drawn to mystery and prepared to entertain the fantastic maybe. And you'll just dismiss the implications of the words before you because you don't dare believe something so outlandish. Because in the end, and truth is not the problem and belief is, maybe someone will understand who, more importantly, what I really am. Maybe it'll be you. But either way, I have been away for a very long time. It is time for me to go home. Thank you, Noah. I will always uphold our agreement. The stories have been told, but their shadows will continue to haunt our minds. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Hauntings and Horrors. Turn on notifications, so you won't miss any thrilling horror stories. Good night, and sweet dreams.